So, in this final video, we will actually make a ticket system or some kind of a ticket system where when we have a lot of enemies, they will not rush us all together. Okay, so we will take the first closest enemies, the first well, we're actually going to have a threshold actually, so we can change that dynamically. So we will take the first enemies, and when we kill somebody we will add another and another. Okay, and if somebody attacks us that we are not currently looking at him, we're going to rotate to look at him. Now of course, if you have animations for different for different directions of counter attacks, then you can use those, and I'll mention how to do it in a few. So let's start by first making an empty game object that is going to serve as being our game manager. Now, okay, now it's not going to be an actual ticket system, but it's going to be some like an actual ticket system. Okay, so we basically manage all our enemies, take the 5 first that are closest to our player, and then we choose at random from those closest enemies. Okay, and we choose one to attack. Now we're going to use list, so we need a reference to the namespace of generics. Okay, the reference to our player, the reference to the stats of our player, a list that we hold all our enemies, our close enemies, far enemies, all these are lists. Okay, so how many enemies do we want to choose to be close to the player? Okay, how many enemies we actually have close to the player, and then on how many seconds we'll have to pass till we repeat the whole process of getting which enemies are closest to our player, and then deciding which one will attack. Okay, our internal timer, I'm only having it public so that we can see it from the inspector, and our constructor where we're going to use an eye comparer, and you will see in a bit why we will use it. So first off, let's change the tag from over here so that we do not forget it from the inspector. Okay, let's find the player, simple stuff. Now we want on all our enemies we want to assign the player as the target, so a simple for loop will do this job for us, so we don't have to do anything else. Otherwise we can simply assign it from the inspector to all our enemies. Of course, this wouldn't be ideal. The actual constructor for our comparer, and the reference to a player stats. Now on update, we only want to check from the player stats, we only want to check if the player is not counter attacking. Then we do all our timers and all our logic basically. Okay, now we want to do it this way because when we are counter attacking we don't want to be also to be attacked, or you might want in your game. Now of course you will have to write your own logic for what will happen, or if the enemy can interrupt your player's animation. So our timers, we simply add to the timer, and when it passes the maximum ticket timer, then we clear our list of close enemies, because until the timer reaches the maximum ticket timer, the player might have moved. Okay, so we clear the list of our close enemies, and we call the other function, this function, that is ticket system for AI. Now ticket, where you see ticket, take it with a little bit of grain of salt. Okay, and then we reset the timer. Now our ticket system for AI, we first need to sort the list of enemies. Okay, which basically, let's see where it is. just a public function that takes all enemies list and sorted by the object distance comparer, which is this private class over here. Okay, now this class derives from the eye comparer, and we want to compare transforms. Okay, you can use objects over here, but in our case we only want to use transforms. Now the whole of this basically compares the two objects, and then it returns 1 or -1 depending on which is in our case which is further away from our player. Okay, we want a reference object, we want a public object distance comparer where we pass our reference object equals our reference. Okay, so this is basically what it calls by itself, and then we check from the compare. We basically take the two distances, okay, our return value, and we check if the x is lower than the y, then we return -1, or else we return the 1. Okay, and then simply return it. This is the eye comparer, and we simply sort a list. So we simply sort a list of enemies with that comparer. Okay, so here's that. Let's close this and let's go back to where we were. So we sort our list of enemies. So our list now is sorted by which enemy is closer. So at 0 is the closest enemy we have. Okay, now we have a threshold that we want to take with how many close enemies we want to work with. Okay, let's say we have 5 enemies. Let's say we have 10 enemies, but we want to work only with the 5 closest to us. Okay, if we know that we have 10 enemies, then things are pretty easy and pretty simple. Okay, we take the 5 first, but if we have our threshold at 5 and our enemies are 3, or we have killed all the other enemies, then we're going to start getting errors from our list, because we're going to be searching for enemies that are not there. So we want to use a dynamic, pretty much a dynamic threshold. Okay, so we create a new float which is going to serve as a threshold. We initialize it at 0, of course, and if the count of our enemies is closer than the actual threshold we set from the inspector, then we take all the available enemies, we take them as the threshold, the count of all our enemies. Okay, so if not, then that means we have plenty of enemies, then the threshold is the actual threshold we set from the inspector. Now we want to avoid errors from searching empty lists, so the best way to do it is to actually see that we have some enemies inside our list. Now we take the first enemies. Depending on our threshold, as I said before. Okay, we do that with a for loop. Okay, and we check if the eye is closer than the threshold, then we add it to the close enemies list, and we do not want to use the transform, so we just take the enemy AI script. Okay, so if the eye is higher than a threshold, then we add them on a different list, which is the enemies that are far away from us, and then we find who is going to attack from all of those. Okay, if we do not have any enemies, then you will have to write the logic for that. So we have our enemies, we have sorted them out, which ones are close to us and which ones are far away from us. Okay, let's find who attacks. The same as above with a threshold. Okay, and then we pick somebody at random based on a threshold, so how many close enemies we have. But first, for everybody, for all our enemies or all our close enemies, we want to enable the evade mode, which is when they are not attacking, we want them to move around, so they might circle the player. Okay, so we enable evade mode for all close enemies, and then we go to the random enemy we just picked up from all the close enemies, and we disable the evade mode, of course, and then we enable the attack mode, which is the attack enemy equals true. And then we have our enemy AI script that takes everything, all the other logic for this. So basically the script, what it does is sort our lists and put all our enemies into the correct list, and we go from those lists and take what we want to take and do the logic after that. So that's it for the game manager. Let's check the enemy AI script. Now, of course, we have wrote this before, so I think the only new variables I've added is the attack, or not the attack timer, the evade time, the internal evade timer, and a reference to the game manager. Now, we want to set up the reference to the game manager, and we do that by tag. Okay, and we take the list of all enemies and we add this transform, so that we do not have to, if you duplicate all these enemies, okay, you do not have to go and drag and drop them from the inspector one by one. Next, we want to check if we are currently attacking, so that we do not call our state to switch if we are attacking. Otherwise, the nav mesh engine is going to move when we are attacking, so basically the enemy is going to slide away. Okay, and the other thing we want to add is if the character is dead, then we want to inform the game manager that the character is dead, remove him from your list, and of course disable the counter-attack indicator. Now, the major changes I did in this script is basically inside the state switch function. So let's see it. If you are attacking the enemy, then the player is your target. Okay, so you update the position over there. If not, then we can't just give them all the same destination to be the player in our case. Okay, but we want to only give them a destination to go to and start the logic only to the enemies that are going to be close to him, that we want to approach the player. Okay, otherwise we'll all be having it's going to be a mass, and they all gonna go around the player, and it's not going to look that good. So for only to those enemies that we have enabled the evade mode, which is basically everybody that is in our close enemies list, okay, we check the distance from the player. Okay, well, in our case the target destination is the player, since we set that from the start. Okay, so if we are close to him, then, or maybe let's take it the opposite way. If we are not close to him, then the target destination position is actually the position of the player. Okay, so move close to him. If we are close to him, but not too close, since it's not our turn to attack, then we create a new destination of where we want to go. Okay, so that we do not go straight up to his position, so that we evade and move to the left or to the right, or if there is a friendly nearby, we move to the opposite direction or close to him, whichever one you want. Okay, we do it inside an if statement because we do not want to update the position every time, but we have a timer over here, and we create the destination on an interval. Okay, which basically have a timer. If it's higher than the evade time, then the has destination equals false. So the next frame it will run the destination, it will create a new destination once again. Okay, now if we want to go close to the player, but we not want to get too close, so if we basically too close into the player but it's not our time to attack, then we want to simply move back, and the target destination position is our transform dot position plus minus transform dot forward, which basically transform dot back, and we scale it by 4 just to make sure. Okay, and that's basically the state switch. So let's see how we want to create the evade position. Okay, now this is going to be the hard way. The easy way is to create a trigger under our characters, under the enemy. Okay, and check if somebody gets inside the sphere collider, where is the trigger, then enable the logic. Okay, this is going to return a vector 3, so we start by creating the return value so that we do not get errors. So our evade position, if we are not an enemy that it's close to the enemy, if we are not an enemy that's going to be close to the player, let's write it a little bit better, then the target destination is your own transform dot position, so you basically sit there, do nothing else. Okay, so but if you are close to the enemy, then we're going to use, we want to see what's close to us basically, and one way to do it other than having a trigger collider, a trigger sphere collider, and checking what goes in and what goes out, we can basically do the same thing by using physics.overlap sphere. The origin is going to be the transform dot position, and we want a radius of 10. Okay, and this is an array, and it will return every collider that we find inside this overlap sphere. Okay, so if we found colliders, then for every one we found, that is actually an enemy. Okay, so how to tell that it's actually an enemy? Then we only need to check, we're basically checking if it has the enemy AI script, then that means it's an enemy, so an enemy of the player, so that means it's a friendly to us. Okay, and then we get the direction from that collider and we pass it as the position. Now, depending on how you have this, if you are subtracting from your own transform position or from the collider you found position, you might need to get the opposite direction or the direction you have it over here. Okay, so since we have found something that we need to avoid, we do not want to do anything else, so we can break the for loop and simply the first enemy, it simply says that the first enemy that we are going to find, that enemy we want to avoid. By enemy I mean friendly enemy. Okay, enemy of the player. Now something to note is that you do not have to check for the player this way. Okay, since we are already monitoring the distance from him, you do not have to check it over here also. And of course that you probably never going to find any colliders, because the floor also has a collider, so you probably at least get the collider of the floor. And that's why we basically have to check for enemies, for specific scripts that we know that are enemies. Now the other way of course to do it is to actually have a tag to all our enemies, but when I wrote this, I just did it this way. And then the return value is going to be the position we pass from over here. Now, we have a position, but we want to transform that position into world space, and that's where transform point we pass the return value and converts it from local position to world space. And now we have that position, but if you remember, we have the nav mesh agent. It has a threshold of how close you can get to a target before you stop. Okay, and that's about 1.5 or 2. I don't remember exactly the settings right now. So the only way, so just to make sure that we are out of the threshold of the nav mesh agent, then we scale the return value a little bit, and of course you can change that scale to whatever you like. Okay, if it's lower than the threshold, then the nav mesh agent will not move, so you might see it as an error, but it's actually working correctly, but the nav mesh agent doesn't let him move around because it's under its stopping distance. So let me see. Yes, so some things I've added is before all our attack timers over here that we wrote in the previous video. I've added an if statement to check if you are attacking, if it's turn to attack, and only then do the attack logic. Okay, which is basically over here. And let me see. And yes, after I've attacked, I'm closing the attack enemy boolean and I enable the evade mode. So every enemy, it will only attack once per the life cycle of the AI's decision. So in 10 seconds, which is the maximum ticket timer over here, only one enemy is going to attack and only one enemy is going to attack. After that enemy is going to attack, then he's going to go into evade mode. And let me zoom out to see if I have anything else. So that's it, basically what we have to add into our enemy AI script, and the only thing left is to actually add some logic into our own player, and then so I've added a reference to the counter enemy animation and a reference to the game manager, and the animator over here, I forgot, we have to actually, when we are enabling the counter attack, and let me find it over here, or better yet, let's search for it. So when we are counter attacking, when we enable the counter attack, we want to pass to the player this animator, the animator of the currently attacking enemy. Okay, so we basically update the animator, the character that the player is looking. So let's go back to our character movement. So we set up the reference to the game manager. Okay, and then we have a new we added a new function over here, which is basically finds you a target so that you do not have to assign it from the inspector, which basically goes to the game manager and calls the short list of enemies, and then in turn gets the first enemy from all our enemies list, which is basically the closest enemy, and then it assigns that as our target. Okay, and we pass an index, so on start we want to pass 0, so it takes the closest enemy. Okay, a quick way to change the target enemy, although it will always take the closest enemy, is to I've added a key code, and when I press Q, I'll recall this this function over here, and then I think the only thing left is basically these 3 lines of code, which when we are counter-attacking, we want to rotate to look towards the enemy that we're going to counter-attack. Okay, now this you might not need exactly this code over here. If you have animations that somebody attacks you from behind and the animation is, you know, turns around by itself and attacks that enemy, then you do not have to even change the direction your character is looking. Okay, or if you want to be more nitpicky and you want to have more control over it, on where your own character is looking, then on handle animations you can go over here and add a new direction, or if you want the character to look the other way of your, you know, the other way of where the enemy is looking. This basically depends on what animations you have, or what animations you want to use, and what exactly you want to do in the end. And I think, let me see if I have something else to add, and yes. So basically I've added some ways to reset the booleans, since because we didn't test it on multiple enemies and those were actually never got reset. So just a quick way to reset those is when we're pressing the right key button. Okay, let me zoom out and see. I'm searching for this stuff, which is, I just comment a new stuff I've added over here. So that's basically it, and that's probably the last video in this series. I think we covered pretty much enough stuff. You can expand, of course, a lot more on this, and of course you can change well, basically the only thing I'm not too happy about it is the evade mode over here, where we have this stuff over here. But you can also try to doing it with a spherical LiDAR that is a trigger, when something enters, when something triggers the spherical LiDAR, then you act accordingly to what you need to do. Okay, so that was basically it, and let's see it one more time in action. Now that's a cube that I don't know why it's there, and basically we attack and we counter attack, and you see that when we kill an enemy, another one will take its place, and then if we press Q we will change the target where we are looking, and one by one they will all attack us in the end. So let's see that they actually attack. You will see that they wait for 10 seconds and then they decide which one is going to attack or not. Now that's basically it, what we have to do with this series. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can support me on patreon.com, where with $5 or more you get access to a Google folder where I have all the scripts from all the videos, and in turn you're going to help me make more videos, okay, because all this take a lot of time to make and to prepare. So thanks for watching, check the description for other cool stuff, and I'll see you next time.